Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Arthritis at Home. Moving from pediatric to adult arthritis care is an important milestone that brings new responsibilities, opportunities, and questions, not only for the young person preparing to take charge of their health, but also for parents and caregivers learning how to support that new imminent independence. And joining us today to look at this milestone in a family's life are longtime friends and collaborators of ACE, and that's leading researchers from McMaster University. Starting with Dr. Michelle Batiche. She's a pediatric rheumatologist and researcher who focuses on improving education, skill building, and experience for youth with arthritis and other rheumatic diseases as they prepare to transfer from pediatric rheumatology care to adult. Dr. Karen Beatty brings expertise in research methods and patient and family engagement, helping people with the lived experiences as patients or caregivers become active partners in research and care. And a third key member of the McMaster team is Matthew Schultes. He's diagnosed at the age of 3 with juvenile idiopathic arthritis, and he brings both a patient and a youth perspective to the team and the research work that they do. Team McMaster, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for having us.
Today we're going to focus on a website that you're launching that features various tools to help teens and young adults make this move to adult arthritis care smoother and support the parents, caregivers, and adult rheumatologists in the process. Dr. Bahish, I thought I'd start with you, and maybe you can just give us a little background behind this program, behind the work that has led up to this launch of a new website and showcasing the various tools and resources that the team over at McMaster has developed.
Of course, Kelly. As you mentioned in your intro, the time around transfer from pediatric to adult care is a critical moment in a youth's life. In addition to going through the usual things that a youth experiences when they turn 17 to 18, whether that be moving out to start post-secondary education or starting a job, those who have a chronic rheumatic disease also have to experience this transition from pediatric to adult care, knowing that the healthcare systems are quite different. So youth need to be empowered to learn how to manage their illness on their own, and caregivers need to learn how to let go of some of those responsibilities and help encourage the youth to take those on. There isn't a lot of research right now around what is the best way to do that. And our program here at McMaster has really dived in to see what is it that the youth need, how can we best support them, and what tools can be used to help them through this transition period. So one of the first projects we embarked on was developing a toolkit for youth and caregivers. And this was co-developed with both input from youth and caregivers so that we include the items and the key things that are important to the youth and the caregiver. So we developed a toolkit that includes a roadmap for youth that help them guide them through this journey of transition. There's also a caregiver pamphlet that explains what it is that the caregiver can do to help their youth transition better. And finally, some hacks or tips for youth to help them learn some of these self-management skills. And so after we developed this toolkit, we did test it out to see, does it improve any transition readiness skills in the youth? And indeed, we did find that with this toolkit, readiness for transition does improve over time. So with that information, we wanted to take it a next step further and make this toolkit available to all youth and caregivers so that they have readily accessed material to help them through this challenging period in their lives.
Fantastic. I think that's a great segue or introduction for Matthew, maybe for you to tell us a little bit about the youth roadmap that Dr. Batish has referenced and the tools that have been developed for young people with arthritis. How do these tools maybe differ from other ones that are available and that maybe are a little more traditional or conventional?
Yeah, so the youth roadmap is essentially just a guide that can help you gain skills and also just bring greater awareness to what this transition process looks like. Because there's such a big unknown about it. Like some people don't hear about it until like they're 18 or into adult care. That's when they start to realize what this transition process looks like. So this helps you gain a better awareness where you can look at it like where you're 14 or 15 years old. And so it outlines us like 6 important skills for you to be able to develop. And it was also a guideline to help you achieve those goals. It gives you like an easy checkbox to follow, as well as comparisons between adult care or pediatric care. And also, it's very unique because it was made alongside youth, as Dr. Patish mentioned. And so it gave them the opportunity to write down things that they implemented during their transition. And so what worked for them is also listed on the youth roadmap as well.
So, Matthew, I think our audience can benefit from your perspective because maybe to help them understand what are the like actual real life challenges that patients experience. And I think what you've done is you've sort of defined 2 different ones for us, and that is younger patients, say 14 to 18, who are just going to be starting to think about this and starting to seriously have some concerns and worries. And then the 18 to 22 transition, post-transition, sort of 2 different audiences. Is this guide able to help both of those groups? And what are sort of some of the specific challenges that are addressed?
Yeah, so to your first point about just like the general challenges, a lot of them revolve around like just increased responsibility. Like you're taking on a greater responsibility in your care, like taking on full like independence and like going to your adult healthcare appointments like on your own. But like on the outside of that, like in your daily life, like you're maybe starting work, you're going off to education, you might be living on your own for the first time. And those are all very important skills that you need to develop alongside your healthcare skills. And sometimes that can get very overwhelming. At that point, you may not have all of the skills necessary to take that on. And something that's very important is to start developing these skills early, which these tools are able to help, like where it brings awareness to what's important and how you're able to start learning about them. Like say, for example, advocacy, whether that be like in your healthcare appointments, like how to talk to your doctor more, what's the important questions to ask, but also outside of that, like how to communicate your disease to your job, to your friends, anything like that. And also, when you transition into that process, hopefully you're able to gain those skills. So once you reach adult care, it's a fairly true transition, but that's honestly not always the case. Like where there's always going to be at least a couple things that you feel like you're lacking skills in, or maybe you've like were given barely any advice in the first place, so you're kind of starting from scratch. And these tools can really help with that, like where it doesn't really matter at what age you are, but if you're willing to start developing these skills or just want to have a greater awareness, these tools can help you with that in a great way.
If I can just add to that, Kelly, for a second, I think Matthew points out that in a lot of cases, we don't know what we don't know as parents and as youth who are experiencing something. And so if you've never visited or had any experience in a healthcare situation that's directed more to adults, you don't really necessarily understand that your appointments might be much shorter. You may have a 15 or 20-minute appointment with an adult provider, which is very different perhaps than you had in pediatric care. Oftentimes information is shared with your parents as well as you as the youth. And in adult care, it's really mostly the youth that is sitting in front of the clinical team, answering questions and making decisions on their own. I think even things like the clinical locations where you see a healthcare team can be different. In pediatric care, most children go to see their healthcare team in a pediatric hospital. And in adult care, you may go to a smaller community clinic where there may only be one practicing rheumatologist. And so I think not even realizing that these differences exist, and us helping you understand what these differences are in the toolkit helps to prepare you for some of those. I didn't even know what I didn't know. And so it initiates a conversation when you start learning about these differences of, oh, what's it going to be like? What else do I need to know? And as Matthew alluded to, there's lots of information in there that will help lead you to initiate some of those conversations or continue some of those conversations, both with the pediatric team as well as the adult team after you've transferred.
I'm going to stay with you, Dr. Beatty, because a lot of parents in our audience, myself included, have lived and know what a fine balance, I would say it's almost a tightrope, that a parent walks as their children get older and start heading to sort of that 18, 19 years old, and maybe they're going off to university, maybe they're starting a job, maybe they're moving out. And that tightrope where you still want to be so involved, but you have to be giving up at the same time. And this just seems to me another dimension, an extremely challenging dimension to that kind of passage for parents, and why these resources for parents and caregivers is so important. Maybe you can just walk us through the guide and the thinking behind the guide, and maybe some of the feedback that you've received for it.
Yeah, I think there's a few key points there, Kelly, that you highlighted. I think the first one that both Matthew and Michelle spoke to is recognizing that this change in care is inevitable. That's the way our healthcare system works. The time might be a little bit fluid, whether you transfer directly at 17 or 18, but this is something that's going to happen. And so preparing as early as possible is one of the most important things that parents can do, while they have support of the pediatric healthcare team to kind of walk them through how they can help their youth. It's not intuitive for every parent to know and understand what their youth needs to be able to do or should be able to do. And let's face it, every child matures at a different rate. Every child's condition affects them differently. And so there can't possibly be a one size fits all. It needs to be a very individualized approach, and parents know their children the best. So where can we help parents challenge their youth to become more independent? And where do we need to kind of step back, give it a little bit of time, and then allow the parent to push a little bit further when the child is ready? And so I think one of the things that the parent toolkit does is helps to normalize this process and this feeling of that comes along with the transfer to adult care. Some of the things that we heard over and over again when we spoke to parents about this process of transfer is the feeling of all of a sudden there being a hard cutoff of, I'm no longer informed about my child's care. I don't know what's going on with them. I'm not allowed into appointments. And that's a really, really difficult change for parents to accept, especially if it happens suddenly. So as your child gets older, if they can start to communicate with the medical team themselves, try that out, see how it goes. Because not being able to expect that or know or understand the intention behind why is my child going into this appointment on their own when they're in adult care can be really difficult. The second thing that we heard over and over from parents is this feeling of loss with their connection with the pediatric team. And in some ways, for some families, it was almost like a grieving process of, I've known these people for a long time. I trust my child's health in their hands. I trust the decisions and the advice that they give us. And now we're going to a new person that I don't know and don't necessarily trust. And so that's another difficult adjustment that we have to normalize. It's very, very common for parents of children who are transitioning to feel this way. How can we build your confidence in this new provider? And how can we help you to kind of feel a less of a sense of loss? Because it certainly can be quite difficult for not only the youth, but also for the parents. And so I think those are kind of key aspects, is starting early, having the parents on board with helping their child as much as possible, but having the parent involved in letting the team know and understand, this is where my child is at. We might need some little bit of help. We might need to back off on helping them, for instance, order their own prescriptions or manage communication with their education team or their teacher because they're not quite there yet. How can we build those skills while they're 16, 17 so that when they get to college or university or to a workplace, that they've learned the advocacy skills for helping the youth say, this is what I need. This is where I have limitations, and how can the system help me in terms of being as successful as possible when I'm in the next kind of phase of my life.
I'm just going to follow up because all three of you have cited, obviously, the other key player in this moment, and that is either the pediatric or adult arthritis specialist. So, Dr. Beatty, I'm just wondering, does that reference guide have there's an important clinical application for it. How could these pediatric or adult arthritis care specialists possibly use that guide in their practice?
I think there are certainly adult care providers who have a lot of experience in welcoming youth and young adults into their clinics. That's the way that we do things at McMaster. Most of the time when youth at McMaster transfer to an adult provider, they've met that adult provider before they actually are transferred at the age of 18. But that's not the way that all systems, that all provinces work. And so the information that's provided in the toolkit doesn't all have to be accomplished at the time of the exact transfer. Some of those skills and some of that development and some of that letting go continues on after the child or the youth has already transferred to adult care. And so having conversations with the adult provider about where your child is currently at, what are they really good at and what can they handle right now and what might they need extra support with, even though they're 18, I think is really key. I think also helping them understand, the trajectory of how their child has experienced their condition. One of the things we also heard from parents is that the adult provider doesn't know what my kid's been through over the last 3 years, 7 years, even longer. And so, helping to the healthcare provider on the adult side of things understand that, and helping them understand that this is that often these skills are a work in progress, that if they can't do something right away, they might need your help or they might need advice on where else they can go to get some of those skills is really, really important. So transferring skills to your youth, but also, it's okay to have a conversation with the adult provider. Let them know where you're at. Let them know that, there may be a time when you need to have a conversation, and that's okay. This is a process. It's not an event.
Final question, Dr. Batish, I'm going to go back to you. You started us in this discussion talking about some of the research that was behind the development of the tools and that people can find information about on the website. This research, I want to underline for our audience, is truly leading edge, pioneering research that you have published and that has reached audiences not just in Canada, but in the United States and internationally. That's how important the work is that you're doing. Congratulations on that, by the way. And I know the research journey doesn't end here. So I'm just wondering what's in the future in terms of gathering more evidence and science to make these resources and tools even better and more effective for their intended audiences.
Thank you, Kelly. So I think the first thing I'd like to mention is with the help of our research and the support of our research program, we've been able to translate this toolkit into 6 other languages. So it is, much more accessible to families who may not speak English as their first language. So I think that's an incredible accomplishment and a really a nice thing to have available on the site. In terms of our next steps, now that we have this toolkit readily available, we recently completed a feasibility study to see if a specific study can move forward. And what we did in that study is we looked at a transition coach, which is an individual with healthcare experience who will be meeting with youth both during and after their transfer virtually. So that they have a point of contact in between their appointments, between their pediatric or adult provider appointments. And what this transition coach can do in between these appointments is have sessions that are focused on some of the key points that are embedded in the transition roadmap within the toolkit, so that the youth have an outlet, someone that they can speak to help them go through some of these skills, someone they can get advice about, how do I advocate for myself with my employer, for example, and another outlet for potential mental health concerns that may come up between appointments. And so that feasibility trial has now concluded, and we are now going to move forward with the next phase, looking at the effectiveness of this coaching intervention. And hopefully we'll be able to recruit patients from across sites in Canada so that we could see and follow those patients during and right after they transition to see if a coaching intervention can be effective in helping improve transition outcomes in these youth.
Really exciting. And once again, congratulations to all of you. I know a lot of members of the audience today are probably either youth living with arthritis or their parents and caregivers. And the work you're doing on their behalf is so important and so valuable. So thanks for that. And thank you very much for joining us. We look forward at ACE to continuing our collaboration with the team over there at McMaster. And that concludes this special episode of Arthritis at Home. Thanks so much for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks, Team McMaster. See you soon.
Thank you.
You guys.
Thanks, Kelly.